Welcome to English in Mastery. This isn't English for tests or textbooks. This is how English sounds when people think clearly, disagree calmly, and make real decisions. In this session, you'll listen to advanced C1, C2 level English used in professional debates and critical discussions. No tricks, no exaggeration. Just real language used the way native speakers actually use it. Relax, listen, and let your ear adjust. Let's begin. You're about to hear advanced English, the way it's actually used when people disagree politely, defend ideas under pressure, and think out loud in real time. Not textbook English, not scripted debate English. This is the kind of language people use in boardrooms, panel discussions, graduate seminars, and serious conversations where ideas matter. So don't just listen for vocabulary, listen for how ideas are built, softened, challenged, and reframed. Let's start with something simple but uncomfortable. Most learners at C1 or even C2 level can understand almost everything they hear, but they still freeze when a discussion turns complex. Not because they lack words, but because they don't know how to manage thinking and speaking at the same time. Native speakers don't wait for perfect sentences. They shape their ideas while speaking. You'll hear hesitation, adjustment, and correction. And that's not weakness. That's control. Listen to this first exchange. I see your point, but I'm not entirely convinced that solves the underlying issue. That sentence is doing a lot of work. It acknowledges the other person, signals disagreement, and keeps the tone calm. You'll hear versions of this constantly in professional debates. Sometimes it sounds like, I get where you're coming from, but I'm not sure that addresses the bigger picture. Or, that makes sense on paper, though I think there's more to unpack here. Notice what's missing. There's no direct, you're wrong. There's no aggressive pushback. Instead, the speaker creates space. This is critical thinking in spoken form. Now listen carefully to how the response develops. That's fair. Let me clarify what I meant. I'm not suggesting it's a complete solution, but rather a starting point. This is another pattern you'll hear again and again. That's fair is not agreement. It's a signal of respect. Native speakers use it to slow the conversation down and reset the tone. You might also hear, that's a valid concern, or, I think that's a reasonable question. What matters here is how ideas are layered. Claim first, adjustment second, limitation third. This structure keeps discussions productive. Let's go a little deeper. In practice, though, the situation is more complicated than that. This phrase appears everywhere. Meetings, interviews, academic discussions. It prepares the listener for nuance. You'll often hear it followed by contrast. On paper, it looks straightforward, but in practice, there are constraints we can't ignore. Now, imagine this sentence spoken slowly, thoughtfully, with a short pause after though. That pause signals reflection. Listening for pauses is just as important as listening for words. Here's another common move. I don't disagree with the principle. I'm just questioning how realistic it is. This is classic advanced English. It separates ideas from execution. Native speakers do this to avoid personal conflict. You might also hear, I'm on board with the idea, in theory, but I'm skeptical about the rollout. Notice the verbs, questioning, skeptical, on board. These are everyday phrases, but when combined, they create precise meaning. Now listen to how someone pushes back gently but firmly. With respect, I think that assumption needs a closer look. With respect doesn't mean respect in an emotional sense. It's a discourse marker. It warns the listener that disagreement is coming. Other versions include, if I'm being honest, at the risk of oversimplifying, or just to play devil's advocate for a moment. These phrases buy thinking time. They also prepare the listener psychologically. Here's a longer stretch of real-world debate-style speech. Listen to the rhythm. When you zoom out, the trend is clear, but if you look at the data point by point, the picture becomes less convincing. That's where I think we need to be careful about drawing conclusions too quickly. This is advanced listening because meaning is spread across sentences. The key idea isn't in one line, it's built gradually. Native speakers expect listeners to hold information in their working memory. Now notice how the other speaker responds without rejecting the point outright. I think that's exactly why context matters here. The numbers alone don't tell the whole story. That phrase, "don't tell the whole story," is extremely common. It signals that interpretation matters. You'll hear similar phrases like, "there's more going on beneath the surface," or, "it's not as black and white as it seems." At this level, English becomes less about facts and more about framing. Let's slow down and listen to a moment of hesitation. I mean, maybe, but I still feel like we're missing something. That, "I mean," is not filler. It signals recalibration. Native speakers use it when they adjust their thinking mid-sentence. You'll also hear, "let me rephrase that," or, "what I'm trying to say is." This is thinking out loud. You're not expected to speak perfectly. You're expected to sound human. Now here's a powerful but subtle move. Before we go further, can we agree on what success actually looks like? This is control language. The speaker pauses the debate and reframes it. This happens constantly in leadership conversations. Another version might be, "just so we're on the same page, how are we defining success here?" Notice the plural we. It creates alignment, even during disagreement. Let's listen to how someone narrows a claim. "I'm not saying this will work everywhere. I'm saying it works under certain conditions." This distinction is crucial. Advanced speakers limit their claims to avoid being attacked. You'll hear phrases like, "in this context," "under the right circumstances," or "given these constraints." Now listen to the tone shift. That's a strong argument. My concern is more about the long-term impact. This is respectful disagreement. Praise first, pivot second, focus on consequences. This pattern keeps conversations from becoming defensive. Here's another everyday phrase used at a high level. Where I struggle with that is, this is softer than, "I disagree." It sounds reflective. Native speakers often follow it with a specific reason. Where I struggle with that is the assumption that resources are unlimited. Now listen to a closing move. Ultimately, I think we're closer in opinion than it might sound. This de-escalates tension. It's often used to wrap up debates without declaring a winner. You might also hear, "we may be talking past each other a bit," or, "I think we're actually aligned on the goal." As you listen to the rest of this video, pay attention to these patterns, not just what is said, but how ideas are introduced, softened, challenged, and refined. This is the core of professional English listening at C1, C2 level. Keep listening. The next section will push this further, with faster exchanges, interruptions, and real-time correction, exactly the way it happens in real debates. At this point, the pace usually changes. Conversations become less structured, more reactive, and ideas start colliding in real time. This is where many advanced learners lose confidence, not because the language is too difficult, but because the rhythm is unfamiliar. Real debates are messy. People interrupt, backtrack, and refine their thoughts mid-sentence. Listen carefully to this kind of exchange. "I hear what you're saying, but can I jump in for a second?" That sentence is not rude. It's a social signal. Native speakers use it to take the floor without breaking the relationship. Variations include, "sorry to cut in, but," or, "if I could just add something here." Now listen to what happens next. The issue isn't the idea itself. It's the timing. This is a classic narrowing move. The speaker separates one element from the whole argument. You'll hear this pattern constantly in workplace discussions. Another common version is, "the problem isn't the strategy, it's the execution." Notice how the sentence is short and direct. Advanced English isn't always long. It's precise. Here's a response that shows active listening. "Okay, so you're saying the approach makes sense, but the rollout is the concern." This is paraphrasing in real time. Native speakers do this to confirm understanding and slow the conversation down. It also gives them a moment to think. You might hear, "So if I'm understanding you correctly," or "Let me make sure I've got this right." Now listen to the confirmation. Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at is extremely common. It signals alignment without repetition. Other everyday versions include, "That's the point I'm trying to make," or "That's basically it." As debates intensify, you'll hear people protecting their position without sounding defensive. "I'm not pushing back just for the sake of it. I'm trying to flag potential risks." This sentence frames disagreement as responsibility. It's often followed by specifics. Native speakers do this to maintain credibility. Here's how someone introduces evidence without sounding academic. From what we've seen so far, the pattern is pretty consistent. Notice the softness. From what we've seen so far, limits the claim. It leaves room for change. You might also hear, "Based on our experience," or "Historically speaking." Now listen to a subtle challenge. "I'm not sure the data supports that conclusion." This is firm but calm. No emotion. Just a request for alignment between evidence and claim. Another common version is, "I'm not convinced the numbers back that up." Now listen to how the speaker responds under pressure. "That's a fair point. The data isn't perfect, but it does point in a certain direction." This is intellectual honesty. Native speakers often admit limitations openly. It strengthens their argument, instead of weakening it. Let's listen to a moment of self-correction. "What I should have said is," it works in the short term. This kind of correction is very common. You'll hear, "Let me be more precise," or "To be clear, I'm not saying." These phrases signal control, not uncertainty. As the discussion continues, someone reframes the issue. "I think we're focusing on the symptoms, not the root cause." This phrase appears everywhere. Business, healthcare, education. It shifts attention deeper. Another everyday version is, "We're treating the surface problem." Now listen to how someone grounds the conversation. At the end of the day, this comes down to priorities. "At the end of the day" is not lazy English. It's a framing device. It signals summary. Other common closers include, "When all is said and done," or "Ultimately." Here's a strategic pause. Let's take a step back for a moment. This is a reset button. Native speakers use it when discussions spiral. It slows things down and recenters the group. Now listen to a careful disagreement. "I'd push back slightly on that." The word "slightly" matters. It softens the pushback. You'll also hear, "I'd challenge that a bit," or "I'm not entirely sold on that." As tension rises, tone becomes crucial. "I don't want this to sound dismissive, but we've tried this before." This sentence protects relationships. The speaker anticipates emotional impact and addresses it directly. Now listen to how someone acknowledges history. "That's true, but the context has changed." This phrase introduces evolution. It's often followed by explanation. New constraints, new tools, new expectations. Here's a common signposting phrase. "What worries me is the long-term trade-off." This shifts the focus forward. Native speakers often use "what worries me" or "what concerns me" to signal importance without alarm. Now listen to how someone invites collaboration. Maybe the better question is how we adapt this rather than whether we abandon it. This is high-level thinking language. It reframes disagreement into problem-solving. Other versions include, "How do we make this workable?" or "What would this need to succeed?" As debates approach resolution, you'll hear consolidation. "So we agree on the goal, even if we differ on the path." This sentence summarizes alignment and difference at the same time. It's extremely common in professional settings. Finally, listen to how conversations move forward without full agreement. Let's keep this on the table and revisit it once we have more information. This is not avoidance. It's strategic delay. Native speakers use it to manage uncertainty. As you continue listening, focus on how speakers manage pressure, signal respect, and keep thinking aloud without losing clarity. The next stretch will increase speed, reduce pauses, and introduce overlapping speech, just like real debates when time is limited. Time pressure changes everything. When the clock is running, people stop polishing sentences and start thinking out loud. This is where advanced listening really matters, because meaning comes from structure, not perfect grammar. Listen to how overlap sounds in real discussions. Yeah, but sorry, go ahead. This is not confusion, it's cooperation. Native speakers interrupt, then yield, to show awareness. You'll also hear, "No, you finish," or "Go ahead, I'll jump in after." Now, listen to a fast clarification. What I mean is, in practice, this plays out differently. That phrase, "what I mean is," buys time and sharpens meaning. Other versions include, "let me put it this way," or "the way I see it." As stakes rise, people start testing assumptions. Are we sure that's the actual constraint? This question doesn't accuse, it invites verification. In real debates, you'll hear, "Is that really the bottleneck?" Or, "Is that the limiting factor?" Now notice how someone resists false urgency. "I get the urgency. I'm just not convinced speed alone solves this." This sentence separates emotion from logic. It acknowledges pressure without surrendering reasoning. Native speakers often say, "I understand the concern, but," followed by a narrower claim. Here's a subtle redirect. Before we lock anything in, can we sanity check the impact? Sanity check is everyday English. It means a quick reality test, not deep analysis. You might also hear, "Let's pressure test this," or "Let's do a quick gut check." Listen to how uncertainty is handled. "I don't have a strong view yet." This is not weakness. In professional debates, it signals honesty. Other common phrases include, "I'm still forming an opinion," or "I need to think this through." Now hear how someone claims space without dominating. "Let me add one thing, then I'll stop." This reassures the group. Native speakers manage airtime explicitly, especially in tense rooms. As disagreements sharpen, you'll hear reframing around risk. The upside is clear. The downside is harder to unwind. This contrast structure is everywhere. Clear, balanced, memorable. You'll also hear, "The benefit is immediate, but the cost is long-term." Now listen to how someone grounds risk in reality. "If this goes wrong, we don't just fix it with a patch." That's concrete thinking. Native speakers often anchor arguments in consequences, not theory. Here's a quiet but powerful move. "Who's accountable if this fails?" Accountability language changes the room. It turns abstract debate into ownership. Variations include, "Who owns this?" or "Where does the buck stop?" Notice the response. "That would sit with my team." Short, direct, no hedging. Credibility comes from clarity. Now listen to a common de-escalation. "Let's not make this personal." This appears when tension rises. It resets tone without assigning blame. As conversations mature, people start mapping options. We have 3 realistic paths here. Numbering is a structuring tool. Native speakers use it constantly to reduce chaos. Listen to how options are framed. Option 1 is fast but risky. Option 2 is slower but safer. Option 3 is a hybrid. This pattern helps listeners track complexity under pressure. Now listen to how someone challenges a false binary. "I don't think it's either or." This phrase opens space. You'll also hear, "It's not that simple," or "There's a middle ground." Here's how someone introduces a compromise. "What if we sequence this instead of deciding everything today?" Sequencing language is advanced, but common. It turns one big decision into smaller ones. Now notice how agreement is signaled without celebration. "I can live with that." This doesn't mean enthusiasm. It means acceptable. Other versions include, "That works for me," or "I'm okay with that." As alignment forms, people restate commitments. So next steps are clear. This signals closure. It prepares the group to move forward. Listen to how tasks are assigned. "You'll draft the plan. I'll review it by Friday." Simple future tense. No complexity. Execution language is usually plain. Now listen to a final check. Any strong objections before we move on? This invites dissent explicitly. It prevents silent disagreement. Native speakers value this moment. Silence follows. Okay, let's proceed. That's how real decisions sound. No drama, just momentum. As a listener, your goal is not to catch every word. It's to track moves, framing, narrowing, redirecting, grounding, committing. This is what advanced comprehension looks like in the real world. In the next stretch, you'll hear a longer, more realistic exchange with multiple speakers, shifting alliances, and subtle pressure. Don't translate. Don't analyze every sentence. Just follow the structure of thought as it unfolds in real time. Now the conversation stretches out. Fewer clear turns. More overlap. This is where many learners think they've lost the thread, but native speakers are still following because they're tracking intent, not sentences. Listen to how a longer exchange unfolds. I'm not against the idea. I just don't think we've thought through the second-order effects. Second-order effects means consequences that come later, not immediately. This phrase is common in policy, business, and strategy discussions. You might also hear downstream impact. Another voice jumps in. But if we keep delaying, we're creating a different set of risks. Notice the structure. Not denial. Comparison. Native speakers often argue by weighing risks, not eliminating them. Here's how someone clarifies under pressure. Can we pause on that for a second? I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. This is alignment language. It slows the room without confrontation. The response comes quickly. Fair. I'm talking about customer trust, not short-term metrics. This is a scope correction. Advanced speakers constantly define what they mean, even mid-debate. Now listen to how a challenge is framed. How confident are we in that assumption? Confidence questions are powerful because they force calibration. You'll also hear, on a scale of 1 to 10, how sure are we? Here's the answer. Not 100%, but confident enough to move. This is probabilistic thinking. Native speakers rarely speak in absolutes in serious debates. Someone pushes further. What would change your mind? This is one of the strongest neutral questions in English. It tests whether a position is rigid or evidence-based. The reply is thoughtful. If we saw early signals of backlash, I'd reconsider. Signals is another common word. It implies early data, not full proof. Now listen to how guardrails appear naturally. So we agree that if churn spikes beyond a certain point, we pause. This sentence turns discussion into a rule. Native speakers often formalize agreement this way. Another voice adds precision. We should define that threshold now, not later. This is future-proofing language. It prevents arguments after the fact. Here's how uncertainty is acknowledged openly. I don't know the exact number offhand. Offhand means without preparation. Very natural, very common. But the speaker doesn't stop there. Let me follow up with a proposal by end of day. Commitment restores confidence. In real conversations, saying what you'll do next matters more than having every answer. Now listen to how tension briefly spikes. It feels like we're overcomplicating this. This phrase often signals impatience. It's a pressure move, sometimes unconscious. The response is calm. Complexity exists, whether we name it or not. This kind of sentence reframes without attacking. Native speakers often respond to impatience with reframing, not resistance. Another interruption. Can we be honest for a second? This signals emotional content is coming. It often precedes a value-based statement. The speaker continues, I'm worried about how this lands with longtime customers. How this lands is everyday language. It means how something is perceived emotionally. Someone else grounds it. That's valid. We've built trust over years. Short sentences often carry the most weight in English. Now listen to a subtle shift toward resolution. So, what I'm hearing is, the concern isn't change itself, it's surprise. This is synthesis. It shows deep listening. Native speakers do this to move debates forward. The group responds, yes. Simple agreement. No elaboration needed. Here's the next step. Then the lever is communication, not timing alone. Lever is metaphorical language. It's extremely common in strategic talk. Another voice checks reality. Do we have the bandwidth to do that well? Bandwidth means capacity, not internet speed. Very common in work contexts. The answer is conditional. If we narrow the scope, yes. Notice how conditions shape decisions. Now listen to a moment of alignment. I think that's reasonable. Reasonable is a key word. It signals acceptance without excitement. Someone locks it in. Let's capture this before we lose it. This phrase appears when clarity finally emerges. The moderator summarizes. We move forward with a phased approach, clear messaging, and predefined pause points. Summaries like this are essential. Native speakers rely on them to close loops. One final concern surfaces, and we revisit in 2 weeks? Revisit language keeps doors open. The answer is firm, yes. With data. That's how debates end in real life, not with victory, but with a plan. As a listener, notice how meaning comes from repetition of themes: risk, trust, timing, communication, ownership. Vocabulary matters, but structure matters more. In the next segment, the pace will increase again. You'll hear shorter turns, sharper pressure, and more persuasive language. Your task is to notice when language shifts from reasoning to influence, and how skilled speakers respond without escalating. Stay with the flow. You're not training perfect English. You're training real-time understanding under pressure, the same way fluent professionals actually use the language every day. Pressure language often sounds reasonable on the surface. That's what makes it effective. In fast debates, influence rarely looks aggressive. It sounds polite, confident, and decisive. Listen to this line. Everyone's basically on the same page here. That sentence feels calming. But notice what it does. It compresses disagreement. It suggests that remaining concerns are minor or unnecessary. Now listen to the response that keeps the room honest. I think we agree on the objective. I'm not sure we're aligned on the timeline yet. This separates goals from methods. Native speakers use this distinction constantly to slow false consensus. Here's another common pressure move. We can't afford to get stuck in analysis. This is urgency framing. It implies that thinking is the problem. A grounded response sounds like this. I'm not trying to slow us down. I'm trying to avoid rework. Rework is everyday language. It points to cost without drama. Now, listen to a subtle escalation. If we don't act now, we'll fall behind. This is a prediction framed as certainty. It creates emotional momentum. A skilled listener hears the opening. What specifically changes if we act now versus a few weeks later? This question forces precision. It turns urgency into analysis without sounding defensive. Here's another polite push. Let's not overthink edge cases. This minimizes risk by labeling it fringe. The response stays factual. How many users would that affect? And what happens if it fails? No emotion, just scope and impact. This is how professionals keep credibility under pressure. Now listen to confidence used as evidence. I've seen this work before. Experience matters, but it's not proof. A clean response sounds like this. What conditions made it work then? And do we have those conditions now? This respects experience while testing relevance. Here's a social pressure move. Most teams are ready. Readiness is vague on purpose. A neutral clarification follows. Ready in what sense? Technically, operationally, or from a customer perspective? Native speakers often unpack vague claims like this in real time. Now, listen to how tone is protected. I don't want this to turn into a blame discussion. This anticipates conflict and redirects it. A steady reply might be, agreed. Let's focus on decisions and outcomes. Outcome language keeps discussions productive. As time runs out, decisions get compressed. We need to land this. Land this is common spoken English. It means finalize. A calm response adds structure. Then let's define the decision rule clearly. Decision rule language is advanced but natural in professional settings. Now hear the rule being shaped. If metrics stay within range, we proceed. If not, we pause. Simple. Conditional. Actionable. Someone checks alignment. Are we comfortable with that? Comfort here means acceptance, not excitement. Another voice answers, yes, as long as the metrics are explicit. Explicit means clearly defined. It's a key word in high-stakes conversations. The moderator steps in. Let's list them now. Lists create clarity under pressure. You hear the metrics: conversion rate, cancellation rate, support volume. Short nouns. No extra language. This is how real decisions sound. Someone adds a final safeguard. And sentiment. Sentiment is increasingly common. It refers to tone, feedback, and emotional response. The group nods verbally. That makes sense. Notice how often this phrase appears. It signals closure. Before moving on, one last check. Any concerns we haven't named? This question protects against silent disagreement. Silence follows. Okay, let's move forward. That's not excitement. That's alignment. As a listener, pay attention to how influence shows up. Urgency, confidence, social proof, minimization. These are not bad. They're tools. Problems arise when they replace reasoning instead of supporting it. Advanced English listening is not about catching every idiom. It's about recognizing when the conversation shifts from exploring truth to pushing action, and knowing how skilled speakers respond without escalating. In the next stretch, you'll hear a fast response drill. Short lines, immediate replies, no explanations. This trains reflexes, not theory. Stay focused on clarity, calm tone, and forward movement. Now the tempo shifts again. Shorter turns, less explanation. This is how real meetings end when time is tight and decisions still matter. You hear a line. You respond once. No speeches. Just clean upgrades. Listen. This is obvious. The response is simple. It may feel obvious. Let's confirm it holds under scrutiny. No argument. No ego. Just a check. Next line. You're overthinking this. Response. I'm clarifying risk so we can move faster later. That sentence reframes thinking as speed, not delay. Next. There are only two options. Response. I think there are a few more. Let's list them quickly. Listing breaks false limits. Next. That's just your opinion. Response. It is. Let's test it against measurable outcomes. Opinion meets evidence. Calmly. Next. If you disagree, you're blocking progress. Response. Disagreement helps refine progress. Let's compare assumptions. This keeps disagreement legitimate. Next. We don't have time to debate. Response. We have time to set one clear decision rule. Decision rules save time later. Native speakers rely on them. Next. This worked before. Response. It might again. Let's check which conditions still apply. Experience is respected, not worshipped. Next. I don't trust their judgment. Response. Let's evaluate the idea, not the person. This protects relationships and logic at the same time. Next. We should launch now and fix issues later. Response. We can move fast with guardrails, so we don't damage trust. Guardrails is now part of the shared language. Next. Leadership won't like a delay. Response. Leadership will care most about outcomes and risk control. This redirects fear upward into accountability. Next. Most people agree with me. Response. That's useful. Let's still surface objections. Silence is not agreement. Skilled speakers know that. Next. It's just common sense. Response. Common sense is a starting point. Let's validate it quickly. Validation beats confidence. Now notice what's happening. These responses don't attack. They don't lecture. They don't escalate. They keep the conversation productive under pressure. This is how fluent professionals sound when they think in English, not translate into it. Now the conversation slows slightly for reflection. Take a breath. In real life, you won't remember every phrase. You don't need to. What matters is the pattern. You listen for the claim. You listen for the reason. You listen for the pressure. Then you respond with structure. Let's hear a final, realistic exchange. I just want to be decisive. Response. Decisive with guardrails is stronger than fast without them. Short. Balanced. Final. Another voice adds. That feels fair. Fair is one of the most powerful words in English debate. It signals acceptance without emotion. The moderator closes. Okay, we have a plan. That's how meetings actually end. Not with applause. Not with perfect logic. With alignment, that's good enough to move. Now shift your attention inward. As you listen to advanced English, stop asking yourself, do I understand every word? Ask instead, do I understand what they're trying to do? Are they narrowing? Are they reframing? Are they pushing urgency? Are they protecting relationships? Are they moving toward a decision? When you can answer those questions, your listening is already at a C1, C2 level. The next section is designed to be replayed daily, before work, before interviews, before difficult conversations. Listen carefully. I separate confidence from evidence. I separate urgency from proof. I ask for definitions before decisions. I ask for guardrails before commitment. I challenge ideas, not people. I stay calm under pressure. I can change my mind when evidence is strong. I can hold my ground when logic is weak. I don't need perfect English. I need clear thinking. Clear thinking creates clear English. Stay with this training. You're not just learning language. You're training judgment, tone, and timing. That's what makes advanced English sound natural in the real world. We'll close the full session in the final stretch with one last consolidation and a clean ending you can carry with you into any professional debate. Now everything tightens. This is the final consolidation phase, where advanced listeners stop reacting and start anticipating. In real conversations, this is the moment where you no longer wait for your turn. You already know what's coming next. Listen to how experienced speakers anticipate pressure before it appears. I want to be clear about what would make this a success. This sentence sounds simple, but it's strategic. It sets criteria before emotion enters the room. Native speakers often say, "Success looks like this," or "Here's how we'll know this worked." The response builds on it. That helps. Let's anchor on that. Anchor language is common. It means fixing the discussion to something stable. Now notice how ambiguity gets resolved. When you say soon, what does that actually mean? This question prevents future conflict. Vague timelines are one of the most common sources of disagreement in English-speaking workplaces. The answer is specific. Within the next 2 weeks. Specificity lowers tension. Even bad news feels easier when it's clear. Now listen to how expectations are managed. I don't want to overpromise here. This phrase protects credibility. Native speakers often say, "I want to set expectations," or "I want to be realistic." The reply respects that. I'd rather have an honest range than a fixed date we miss. This is outcome-focused thinking. It values trust over appearance. Here's a subtle credibility check. What assumptions are we making that could break this plan? This question doesn't attack the plan. It stress tests it. The answer is thoughtful. We're assuming customer behavior stays stable. Stating assumptions out loud is a high-level skill. It shows maturity, not doubt. Someone adds a safeguard. Then we should monitor behavior closely in the first week. Monitoring language keeps plans flexible. Now listen to how emotional concerns are acknowledged without drama. I'm a bit uneasy about how this will be received. Uneasy is a soft word. Native speakers often choose it instead of stronger emotion. The response validates without inflaming. That's fair. Let's factor that into the rollout. Factor in is everyday English. It means include without overreacting. Now hear how ownership is reinforced. Who's responsible for watching those signals? Responsibility questions turn talk into action. The answer is clear. I'll own that and report daily. Ownership restores confidence faster than reassurance. As closure approaches, people summarize instinctively. So we move forward, but with checkpoints. Checkpoints is common metaphorical language. It implies control. Another voice confirms, yes, no surprises. No surprises is a powerful agreement phrase. It signals trust. Now listen to how final alignment sounds. I'm comfortable proceeding under those conditions. Comfortable here means acceptable and safe, not excited. The moderator closes the loop. Good. Let's document this and move on. Documenting is part of real professional culture. Decisions live on paper, not just in conversation. The room exhales. This is how advanced English actually sounds in the real world. Not dramatic, not polished, functional, human, and precise. Now pause for a moment. What you've been listening to isn't vocabulary practice. It's decision-making language. It's the English people use when something real is at stake. As a learner, here's the shift that changes everything. You stop asking, how do I say this correctly? You start asking, what is the move here? Is someone narrowing the scope? Are they pushing urgency? Are they minimizing risk? Are they asking for commitment? Are they protecting relationships? When you hear the move, the language becomes predictable. Let's do one final internal drill. You hear pressure. You slow it down. You ask for clarity. You define conditions. You commit with guardrails. This is the cycle. Before we close, take these lines with you. Say them out loud. Not perfectly. Naturally. I want to be clear on what success looks like. Let's define that before we commit. What assumption are we making here? What would change your mind? I'm aligned on the goal, not the timeline yet. I'm not asking for perfect, just minimum readiness. Let's move forward with checkpoints. If the data changes, we pause. These lines work in meetings. They work in interviews. They work in negotiations. They work in difficult conversations. And they work because they sound like real people, thinking clearly, under pressure. Here's the final mindset. You don't win debates by speaking more. You don't sound fluent by using bigger words. You sound advanced when you bring structure, calm, and clarity into messy situations. That's what this training is for. You're not memorizing English. You're learning how English behaves when it matters. Now we shift into the final mental calibration. This is where advanced listeners stop translating and start operating. You're no longer following the conversation word by word. You're tracking intent, direction, and leverage. Listen carefully to how strong speakers regain control when a discussion starts to drift. Let's zoom out for a second. This phrase is extremely common in professional English. It signals a reset. It's not dismissive. It's corrective. The follow-up usually clarifies purpose. What problem are we actually trying to solve? This question cuts through noise. Native speakers use it when conversations become circular or emotional. The answer often reframes the debate. We're trying to reduce risk without killing momentum. Notice how both sides are acknowledged. Reduce risk. Keep momentum. This is balanced language. Now listen to how priorities are ranked. If we had to choose one thing to protect, what would it be? This forces trade-offs. High-level discussions always come down to trade-offs. Someone answers plainly. Customer trust. Short answers carry weight. Native speakers don't always elaborate when the value is obvious. The response locks it in. Okay. Then every decision should protect that first. This is principle-based decision-making. Once a principle is set, arguments weaken. Now observe how disagreement continues without friction. I'm not convinced this approach gets us there. Not convinced is softer than wrong. It keeps the door open. The reply doesn't escalate. What would make it stronger for you? This question invites collaboration instead of defense. Here's where evidence enters naturally. I'd need to see how it performs with a smaller group. This is practical skepticism, not resistance. The response accepts it. That's reasonable. We can test before scaling. Test before scale is a common business phrase. It signals maturity. Now listen to how timelines are negotiated. If we add a test, does that push the date? This is a logistical concern, not a complaint. The answer is transparent. Yes, by about a week. Honesty maintains trust, even when it's inconvenient. Then comes the trade-off decision. I'm okay with a 1-week delay if it lowers downside risk. This is conditional agreement, very advanced. The moderator checks alignment. Anyone strongly opposed? Silence matters. In English-speaking cultures, silence often equals consent, but strong leaders still check. Someone speaks up. No. As long as we're clear on next steps. Conditions again. Always conditions. Now notice how next steps are defined. Let's outline who does what by end of day. End of day is a fixed, familiar deadline phrase. The response confirms ownership. I'll draft the plan and share it. Clear action beats vague support. As the conversation closes, tone softens. Thanks for pushing on this. Pushing here is positive. It means challenging constructively. The reply reflects mutual respect. Appreciate you hearing the concern. Hearing means taking seriously, not just listening. This is how trust is built in English, not with politeness alone, but with responsiveness. Now pause. What you've just heard is not advanced grammar. It's advanced coordination. It's how English is used when people are accountable to each other. Here's the key realization at C1, C2. Fluency is not speed. Fluency is control. You control pace. You control framing. You control escalation. You control commitment. Now we do a final synthesis drill. This is not repetition. This is integration. Imagine you're in a meeting, and you hear this line, "We're running out of time." Your upgraded response is not defensive. I hear the time pressure. What's the fastest responsible option? Notice the structure. Acknowledge pressure. Redirect to responsibility. Another line. This is getting too complicated. Your response. It is complex. That's why we need a simple decision rule. Complexity acknowledged. Structure proposed. Another line. We just need to decide. Your response. Agreed. Let's be clear on the criteria before we do. Agreement first. Guidance second. Now listen to how senior speakers exit conversations cleanly. I think we have enough to move forward. Enough is a powerful word. It signals closure without overconfidence. Someone adds, let's capture the decision and revisit if conditions change. This keeps flexibility without reopening debate. The final word often sounds like this. All right. Let's execute. Short, calm, final. That's real authority in English. Before we close completely, internalize this principle. Advanced English is not about sounding smart. It's about making other people feel safe, making decisions with you. Safe because you clarify. Safe because you don't exaggerate. Safe because you surface risk early. Safe because you commit with boundaries. If you can do that, your English will carry weight anywhere in the world. Now take these final lines. These are daily use sentences. They sound ordinary. That's why they work. Let's be explicit about the trade-offs. What would success look like here? I'm open to this. Under the right conditions. Let's test, then decide. I'm comfortable proceeding. If we monitor closely, we can move fast and still be responsible. If the signal changes, we adjust. Say them until they feel boring. Boring means natural. Natural means fluent. You don't need dramatic English. You need dependable English. This is how professionals actually speak. This is how decisions actually get made. And this is how your English moves from advanced to trusted. Now we slow the tempo one last time. Not to relax, but to sharpen. This is the level where listeners stop hearing sentences and start hearing positioning. In real professional conversations, what matters is not what people say first, it's what they commit to last. Listen to how commitment is tested without confrontation. Before we lock this in, What could still go wrong? This is a quiet but powerful question. It doesn't assume failure. It assumes realism. The response isn't defensive. The main risk is misalignment across teams. Misalignment is a common word in global English. It covers confusion, timing gaps, and mixed expectations. The follow-up goes deeper. What would misalignment look like in practice? In practice is an everyday phrase. It moves theory into reality. The answer becomes concrete. Different teams communicating different messages. Specific risks are easier to manage than vague ones. Someone adds a corrective move. Then we need a single source of truth. This phrase is widely used in professional English. It means one clear reference everyone agrees on. The response tightens accountability. Who owns that? Ownership again. Always ownership. I do. Short, direct, credible. Now listen to how resistance appears late in the discussion. I'm mostly on board, but I'm still uneasy about one thing. Mostly on board signals partial agreement. Uneasy softens the concern. The room doesn't rush past it. Say more. 2 words. Very native. Very effective. The concern is clarified. If this rolls out badly, recovery will be hard. This isn't emotional language. It's risk framing. The reply doesn't argue. It mitigates. Then let's define a rollback plan before launch. Rollback plan is common in tech, operations, and policy. It shows foresight. Someone checks feasibility. How fast could we reverse if needed? Fast is relative. So the answer anchors it. Within 48 hours. Numbers build trust. Now, listen to how fear is handled professionally. I don't want us to be remembered for this going wrong. That's fear of reputation. Expressed calmly. The response reframes. We're more likely to be judged on how we respond than whether issues appear. This is mature English. It normalizes imperfection. As the conversation nears closure, the language becomes decisive but conditional. I'm comfortable proceeding with a rollback option in place. Comfortable again means acceptable, not enthusiastic. The moderator summarizes. So we proceed. Monitor closely. And retain the ability to reverse. Summaries reduce future disputes. Someone confirms. Yes, that reflects my understanding. Reflects my understanding is a common confirmation phrase. Now notice how tone signals finality. All right, let's move. No applause. No drama. Just action. This is the rhythm of real decision-making English. Now pause and reflect. At this level, fluency is invisible. No one notices your English. They notice your judgment. That's the goal. Here's a final internal shift you need to make. Stop aiming to sound impressive. Start aiming to sound reliable. Reliable speakers do 4 things consistently. They clarify early. They surface risk calmly. They propose structure. They commit conditionally. Now, do this last silent drill. Imagine someone says, "We'll deal with issues if they come up." Your upgraded response is not confrontational. Agreed. What signals would tell us an issue is emerging? Another line. Let's just see how it goes. Your response. Okay. How will we measure whether it's going well? Another line. We've already decided. Your response. I want to make sure I understand the decision and the exit criteria. Exit criteria is advanced but natural language. It shows foresight. Now take these final phrases. These are not slogans. They are tools. Before we finalize, I want to pressure test one assumption. I'm supportive, with the right safeguards. Let's define how we'll know if this isn't working. I'm comfortable moving forward with a rollback plan. We'll revisit this if the data changes. If these sentences feel simple, that's the point. Advanced English is simple English, used deliberately. You don't need to dominate conversations. You need to stabilize them. When people feel steadier after you speak, your English is doing its job. And that's mastery. Now we push into the last stretch, where advanced speakers don't just respond well, they shape how decisions feel. This is subtle, but critical. In real conversations, People don't only decide with logic, they decide with confidence. And confidence comes from how uncertainty is handled. Listen to how experienced speakers normalize uncertainty without weakening the decision. This isn't risk-free. That sentence sounds obvious, but it does important work. It removes the illusion of certainty before it collapses later. The response doesn't resist it. Nothing meaningful is. This is conversational English. Calm, real, grounded. Now notice how uncertainty gets contained. The question isn't whether there's risk. It's whether the risk is acceptable. This reframing moves the discussion forward. Acceptable is the key word. It implies standards. Someone follows up. Acceptable to whom? That's not a challenge. It's a clarification. The answer brings alignment. To customers first, then to the business. Order matters. Native speakers pay attention to sequencing when they talk about values. Now listen to how people avoid overconfidence. I don't want to oversell this internally. Oversell is common, informal, and professional at the same time. The reply agrees. Agreed. Let's communicate upside and downside. Balanced language increases trust. Then comes an important leadership move. If this underperforms, what will we say? This question prepares the narrative before things happen. Very advanced. The response is thoughtful. We'll say we tested, learned, and adjusted. Tested, learned, adjusted. This sequence appears everywhere in professional English. Now listen to how blame is quietly removed from the system. This shouldn't be about who pushed hardest. This protects relationships. The reply reinforces it. It should be about whether the process worked. Process over personalities. That's C2 thinking. As the discussion tightens, people start future-proofing. If this works, how do we scale without breaking things? Scaling language appears once success is plausible. The answer avoids hype. Slowly, with checkpoints. Simple. Controlled. Now notice how dissent is invited at the end. Is there any concern we haven't named? This is not weakness. It's confidence. Someone hesitates, then speaks. One concern. Messaging tone. Tone is a subtle but real risk. The response takes it seriously. Good catch. We should test that too. Good catch is friendly. Everyday English. Someone asks, how? The answer is practical. 2 versions. Small sample. Compare reactions. Short phrases. Clear actions. As the meeting wraps, commitment language appears. Let's proceed with this plan. Not excited. Not rushed. Grounded. Another voice adds conditions. With weekly reviews. Conditions again. Always conditions. The moderator closes. Decision recorded. Thanks everyone. Recorded decisions matter in real workplaces. Now step back. What you've heard across this training is a pattern. Advanced English doesn't sound clever. It sounds steady. Steady speakers do something important. They reduce emotional load for others. They don't inflate urgency. They don't dismiss risk. They don't hide uncertainty. They don't personalize disagreement. They structure it. Now here's your final applied drill before the ending. You hear this line, we'll figure it out later. Your upgrade. Okay. What's the earliest signal we should watch for? Another line. This feels risky. Your upgrade. I agree there's risk. What makes it manageable or unmanageable? Another line. I don't want to slow things down. Your upgrade. Neither do I. Let's choose the fastest option that protects the outcome. Now internalize this rule. Never fight urgency. Redirect it. Never deny risk. Contain it. Never attack confidence. Ask for evidence. This is how you stay calm while others feel pressure. Now we prepare to close the full training. Not with motivation, with calibration. Take a breath. Say these lines slowly, the way a real professional would. I'm open to this under the right conditions. Let's be explicit about what could break. I'm aligned on the direction, not rushing the decision. We can move fast with structure. If the signal changes, we adapt. This is a bet, and we're managing the downside. If these lines feel natural in your mouth, your English is ready. You don't need to sound native. You need to sound dependable. That's what advanced fluency actually is. Now we close the training the way advanced speakers close real conversations, calmly, cleanly, with clarity that lingers after the words stop. At this level, endings matter, not because they sound impressive, but because they shape what people remember. Listen to how experienced professionals end discussions without reopening debate. I think we're clear on the decision and the conditions. This sentence does two things. It confirms alignment, and it quietly locks the frame. Someone responds, "Yes, I'm clear." Clarity is confidence without ego. Another voice adds, "And we know what would trigger a pause." That's risk awareness carried into the future. The moderator finishes. "Then let's proceed as agreed." No flourish, no justification, just action. This is how high-level English actually ends. Not with certainty, but with preparedness. Now, step back one final time. Everything you've practiced in this session connects to one core skill. You don't react to language. You interpret it. You listen for what's being pushed, what's being minimized, what's being assumed, what's being avoided. And then you respond, not emotionally, but structurally. That's the difference between advanced English and operational English. Operational English works when something is on the line. Before we end, internalize this final framework. You can replay this daily. When you hear a strong claim, ask yourself, what evidence supports it? When you hear urgency, ask, what risk are we accepting? When you hear consensus, ask, what hasn't been said? When you hear confidence, ask, what conditions make it valid? When you feel pressure, slow down and say, I want to make sure we're deciding this on the right criteria. These are not phrases you memorize. They are instincts you build. Now say these final lines out loud, slowly, like a mental reset. I don't need perfect English to be effective. I need clear thinking and calm delivery. I can disagree without being difficult. I can move fast without being careless. I can change my mind when the evidence changes. I can hold my ground when logic is weak. I listen for structure, not noise. I respond with clarity, not pressure. If you can speak like this, you can work, negotiate, and lead in English anywhere in the world. That's what mastery sounds like.